Quartet is what happens when a developer has played like every RPG ever made, and instead of deciding on one to use as a blueprint, they say screw it and use them all. Usually that wouldn't work, but Quartet has so much love and care put into it that not only does it succeed in meshing multiple games into one, but they excel at it. As a disclaimer, I did receive a review copy of the game for free, but my opinions are my own. Quartet is an indie RPG developed by Something Classic. While I personally had not heard of them prior, they have been developing games for over a decade at this point. I first heard about Quartet from a fellow RPG lover, David Vink RPGs, and was pretty interested, but once I found out they were associated with the super cool developers Datadyne, I decided I wanted to go ahead and give it a try. And man, am I glad I did. You see, indie RPGs are a dime a dozen these days. Everyone wants to catch that retro feel. Chained Echo, Symphony of War, Sea of Stars. So many developers are at an age where they are making their own games and want to recapture that experience. But often what happens is they get stuck there, fail to mesh all the systems well. There are exceptions, of course. The aforementioned Sea of Stars was one of the best games to come out in 2023, period. Basically being a Chrono Trigger throwback in terms of gameplay, but telling their own original story in their own original universe. Quartet, much in the same way, takes heavy inspiration from Final Fantasy VI, but seasoned gamers will also see hints of Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, Dragon Warrior, and Saga, or Octopath Traveler if you prefer. The way all of the gameplay elements mesh together and, in themselves, tell part of the story is pretty astonishing. Quartet begins with a familiar setup for fans of games like Octopath Traveler. You're given a choice of multiple protagonists to start with, 4 to be exact, and each introduces you to a unique part of the world, their personal story, and a slice of the game's mechanics. It's a clever way to onboard you into both the combat and emotional tone without feeling like a tutorial. I personally began with Ben, a portly young chef with a heart of gold and the worst luck in Akos. What starts as a simple attempt to get his paycheck from his employer spirals into a wild encounter that unlocks mysterious powers he can't fully control. Each scenario offers a strong mix of charm, mystery, and emotional depth. And while the game is called Quartet, there are actually 8 protagonists, each introduced in pairs. That means every story gives you a main character and their companion, building a surprisingly cohesive ensemble from seemingly unrelated lives. And yes, they do start to converge, but when and how is best left for you to discover. His journey quickly blends slapstick odd jobs, heartfelt moments, and an increasingly magical undercurrent as he teams up with a mysterious woman who may or may not be supposed to kill him. While Ben does not necessarily subscribe to the idea of magic, maybe you can consider subscribing to my channel for Let's Plays, gaming news, and reviews. From there I jump to Alexandra, an 18-year-old mechanic in another bustling city who's trying to keep her family business afloat after her mother falls ill. She's smart, grounded, and very determined, and unfortunately her brother ropes her into some serious trouble. Her story pivots from grounded sci-fi slice of life to something far more magically based, as do most of the stories here, involving gangsters, supernatural symbols, and unexpected animal companions that it's hard not to love. Each scenario offers a strong mix of charm, mystery, and emotional depth. And while the game is called Quartet, there are actually 8 protagonists, each introduced in pairs. That means every story gives you a main character and their companion, building a surprisingly cohesive ensemble from seemingly unrelated lives. And yes, they do start to converge, but when and how is best left for you to discover. For scenario 3 of 4, we have Nikolai and Zikaron, a soldier in a very aggressive army who simply follows orders, and a mysterious automation with its own secret stored deep inside it. Together, they each wield fire and, after uncovering just how bad their government are, do their best to do the right thing and make amends for Nikolai's transgressions. Nikolai's story is incredibly dark and brutal, and honestly had me a little angry. Not at the developers, but at the transgressors for their actions. Whenever a game can make you feel strong emotions, that is a very good sign in my book. And then finally we have the story of Cordelia and Jerome, whom, due to some governmental shenanigans, end up out in the middle of the desert fighting bandits. What they discovered ties all 4 stories together, so I can't really spoil it, but suffice it to say, their water magic skills come in very handy. The duo end up meeting with Nikolai and Juna, and thus my second quartet was formed. Upon completion, you get alternating chapters between the 2 parties where things are seeded but never fully explained. I can't talk more about the story from here because there's no way to discuss it without heavy spoilers, but the 2 groups do meet and you end up with a full party of 8. The plot itself does not break new ground in terms of philosophy. There is very obvious class warfare issues, and the story doesn't shy away from depicting a regime systematically erasing an entire culture for the sake of a superior race or bloodline. And while it does parallel certain events in our modern world, it's not subtle about the statement. You won't find Persona 5 level commentary in depth here, but that's okay. Those kind of layered plots and hidden meanings take entire writing rooms and teams of people to put together. You do get a strong message showing the problems that these thought processes can cause, and sometimes that's enough. That said, the way it tells the story is pretty unique, to the point that I can't even tell you why it's unique for fear of spoilers. Just gotta go with the trust me bro on this one. Also, you can save anywhere, so long as you don't get stuck in a dialogue block, and you can easily walk away and come back later, but considering how short even the most intense of these sections are, you won't have to wait long. Lastly, there is a normal and easy mode in case you don't want to get your teeth kicked in. The music is serviceable, it certainly works in the moment, and it evolves over time. And I can't say I dislike it, but there's levels to video game music. There's soundtracks like Expedition 33 and Undertale, which you can play on your drive to work. And then there's music that you find unoffensive while playing the game, but you also don't really feel like you're missing out if you mute it to watch YouTube while you play. In fact, as a side note, this is a great game to play while doing other things. With long dungeon sections and tight dialogue, you can easily binge a 4-hour Elden Ring deep dive video on YouTube or watch something like Wednesday or K-pop Demon Hunters on Netflix on a different monitor while you play. Again, that's not to take away anything from the musical composition of the game, it's very good. It's just not that level, you know what I mean? And that gets us into gameplay. The world map, while simple, is very reminiscent of Chrono Trigger. That kind of super tiny avatar walking around a fairly robust, topographically dense map. Once inside a location, you switch to something that echoes Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. The way the avatars move and express themselves certainly have that FF6 feel to them, but rather than random encounters, enemies are on the field, usually blocking your path, hence the Mystic Quest comparison. Most of the time, they're blocking the passages that must be defeated to proceed, but on occasion you can find an optional patrol battle, if you want some extra cash or experience. The game is well paced, not needing to grind in order to stay up to par, and as long as you're doing the battles presented, you'll have the tools you need to succeed. In addition, there are nodes on the map where you can walk in for maybe 1 or 2 quick fights and a nice piece of treasure that you otherwise wouldn't have. Speaking of tools, the combat in Quartet is extremely well thought out. Each character has a specialty, and it's up to you to decide how to use them. To a point, there's even build paths. For instance, Zikaron, the robot, uses some pretty decent status and fire abilities, but also leans into a spell that lets it do damage equal to its hit points. So you can build him very tanky with high hit points using gear and stat enhancing tomes to deal heavy damage. Nikolai, conversely, has weaker abilities, but his various guns can let him apply different debuffs depending on which you have equipped. There's also tons of accessories, from strength enhancements to auto counterattacks and multi-hits. The game combat revolves heavily around buffs and debuffs, much like Dragon Quest or Shin Megami Tensei. Enemies hit really hard in lowering their strength and magic stats, even their accuracy, while also keeping your own defenses up and trying to balance poisons and bleeds. It can become a very delicate balancing act. Abilities work based on an AP system. A spell will cost a set percentage of your AP and you recover 10 per turn naturally. This allows you to spam lower cost abilities, like the ones that cost 15, rather safely without having to worry about running dry on AP quickly. But once you get into more powerful skills, balancing your defending, ether uses, auto attacks around survival and damage can become very engaging. For a good chunk of the game, at least half of it, you only have 4 party members to use at any given time, but once the 2 groups converge, you get 8 to work with, allowing you to hot swap characters like in Breath of Fire 4. Back row units even recover AP, making later battles an even more intense affair, trying to keep your AP up, keeping everyone alive, applying status debuffs, all while trying to do damage to enemies. When I say this game draws inspiration from like every RPG you've ever heard of, I mean it. I'm surprised there isn't a materia system or skill tree tucked in here somewhere. One of my favorite aspects of the game is that gear isn't just stat sticks, they are decision-making tools. I mentioned the guns and debuffs, but there are plenty of other examples, like choosing between a high defense value piece of armor or a piece of armor that has lower defense but gives you an extra 5% AP regeneration every turn. Another good example is a high damage weapon dagger for Agata, or a low damage weapon that has a chance to poison, which is extremely powerful against bosses. These out-of-combat decisions really add a wonderful extra layer of decision-making while not bogging down the game with unnecessary systems. It's good, clean fun. The game isn't absolutely flawless. A lot of the dialogue is short and snappy, which can be a good thing, but makes some of the main cast ring a little flat and samey at times. They still have their own individual personalities, but there are also points where I couldn't tell you if Alexandra or Nikolai said a line without on-screen context. Another nitpick is that while I know the game is going for a Final Fantasy VI feel, I would really have liked to see portraits of the characters who are talking, at least for the main cast. The game does a good job of having a character sprite move so you know who's speaking, and of course the name of the character appears on screen, but especially at the start of the game where you aren't used to that, it can get a little confusing knowing who's talking. Overall, though, the writing is extremely competent and the story is compelling despite these complaints, and you will adjust to it all before the end of the prologue sequence. And before long, you'll be reading things in your head in the characters' voices that you've created for them. If all of this sounds fun to you, I highly recommend picking up this gem. I can't even tell you how good the writing in the game is outside of some early game highlights because it'd be very difficult not to spoil it. It only costs $20 normally, and around 24 hours of gameplay, it's absolutely incredible value as well. If you have a Steam Deck, this will be your go-to RPG for the weeks to come, and the way the game is broken into chapters makes it perfect for nice little pre-bed gaming sessions. As always, I don't really give scores. I simply tell you what they are and let you make your own decision, but as someone who loves RPGs, I can definitely recommend this one for your Steam collection. And don't let it collect dust either. It's a respectably length game that is well worth a break from whatever you're playing right now, or as a palate cleanser. Currently, you can play Quartet on PC with console releases for Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation coming later this year, 2025. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All that good stuff does help out a bunch, and I will see you in the next one. Deuces, dummies.